After we got our mullets cut, we did a few weeks at Joshua Tree National Park. Our first hitch was 8 days on and 6 days off, but the National Park Service worked 4 days on and 3 days off, so we were flying solo for a few days on our work week. Our primary goal was installing water bars on a historical trail called the Lost Horse Mine Trail. We did this alongside the National Park Service, and little did I know at the time, it's fairly rare to work alongside them. Water bars are used to push water off a trail downhill so that the water does not pool up on the trail to create erosion. Creating water bars is a lot of hard work and very laborious, but it was satisfying to see your construction of them over time. Our hardest day involved carrying out the lumber for each side of the water bars and hiking them uphill. We clocked in 10 miles that day, hiking up and down the trail, carrying 80-pound water bars on our shoulders between 2 people. Our initial campsite was really great despite the high winds and served to be incredibly scenic. We set up the Montana tent and cooked inside, and we splayed out our tents alongside the campsite. When we were not working with MPS, we did graffiti removal, trail cleanup, and sign installation. We felt that the work we did when we were not with MPS was not as productive, so we aligned our schedule with MPS to following hitches to maximize the days we worked. While it was nice to change up our schedule, that did mean that we were doing a lot more driving. As you have seen previously, your first and last days are more or less dedicated to driving depending on how long the drive is. And while our drive to Joshua Tree was only about 3.5 hours, that meant we only had half days of work on site for the days that we arrived, and we only worked an hour on site on the days that we left in order to be back for D-Rig to spend time cleaning up our tools. The following week was much of the same, but we did get a tour of the trail that we were working on, and we got to see the top of the Lost Horse Mine. If you're ever in Joshua Tree, just know that you're walking over our water bars. The elements did get pretty bad, and there were several times where it was the best option for us to get a hotel for the night to avoid being in the wind. Gusts of up to 70 miles per hour during the night occurred, and while that wouldn't always kill you, it will make it incredibly difficult to sleep, and that does not set you up for a good day's work. After we finished our water bars, we then moved on to rock work, which I had a lot of frustrations with. Luckily, the MPS worker Thomas was incredibly patient with us and was always willing to give feedback to help. We were installing a lot of steps on a part of a trail to again help with erosion. You build with erosion in mind and water flow, so you will hear the term top contact a lot. Long story short, you will want all your big rocks to fit together by hand chiseling them to create a flat surface for the rocks to touch. This is to prevent water from pooling up underneath them and washing away your work. I won't go into too much detail, as you will learn that if you're working on rocks, but what I will tell you is that rock work can be incredibly tedious. If there's any advice I can offer you, is that if you're working with someone who knows much more than you, constantly ask questions, and constantly ask for them to check your work so you don't end up taking too much off of a piece of rock and having to find a new giant rock to then work on again. In our final hitch, we continued working on the steps and got to stay in the ranger station, which was awesome. There's no power or running water in the ranger station, but it did come with beds and was a nice structured shelter, and that's all I needed in order to get some good rest for our work. Some of my largest takeaways during this set of hitches were that there are always going to be variables and constant changes occurring last minute. Oftentimes we didn't know where we were actually going to camp until the day of the hitch. This doesn't ultimately matter, but it does help you feel more confident in what you're doing and more prepared. So you're always going to have moving variables and you're never sure what's going to happen, and that's just something that you have to learn to accept. You might not be working with a National Park Service member, but you'll probably be working with someone who has more experience. And they're not just there to help finish the project, but they are there to help you learn and focus on your skills on trail work. It's also important to work at your own pace. Oftentimes, trying to rush things will set you back further. For example, don't hurt yourself trying to move big rocks quickly, or don't set a big rock into place too early just because you'll have to move it back out later, more than likely. You can also crush your fingers like I did, and then you really won't be able to work at a good pace. So pace yourself. It's also worthwhile to research the weather, even if you can make a big assumption of what it's going to be like. There can always be variables. I never like looking up the weather, but it's definitely worthwhile to do your research just so you don't get caught off guard in freezing cold weather or something completely hot. It could be opposite weather for you if you're working in the summer. So definitely do your research, ask people who've done this hitch before, and try and get as much intel as you can before going so you're not caught out in the rain or the sun. It's also very crucial to keep a positive mental attitude. You'll hear people say PMA a lot during work. I made rock work my enemy and was not the happiest boy in the world while working on it. And it was important to recognize that you don't need to drag everyone else down just because you don't like something. That being said, it's entirely fair to vent and express your feelings when you're in the right environment, but during the workday, you definitely want to keep things moving and motivated just so that you're not putting a damper on everyone else's mood as well. It's also really important to ask questions just in general to the people that you're working with and anyone else that you might just be meeting temporarily, whether that's for the specific hitch or the location that you're in. There are plenty of interesting stories people will have if you just ask them. So you can get a lot of life experience, not just through the work you're doing, but through others. So definitely worthwhile to strike up a conversation with all these interesting people who spend their time on trails. And as I stated before, there are 10 people that live with us in our specific ACE house, and the other group had been working on the Bureau of Land Management in Ridgecrest, working with incursion reduction. They were looking for more out of their ACE experience, as you will understand in the next chapter, and they wrote to our ACE coordinator to see if the teams could be mixed up so that they could experience a hitch at Joshua Tree as well. After some communication, they were able to make the switch happen, so in the schedule, we swapped out 2 of our original team members from 2 from the BLM project, and that cycle continued throughout the rest of the term to allow everyone to try working at both locations at least once. While it would have been great for the team mixing to have been incorporated without intervention, it is worthwhile to communicate any frustrations you are having with the program and see what more you can get out of your time here. 3 months goes by pretty quickly, so definitely write to your program manager if you feel like you aren't getting the opportunity to try out a variety of work.